The Earl of Westmoreland stood at the window of his London townhouse, his shoulders rigid beneath his impeccably tailored morning coat. Outside, fog shrouded Berkeley Square in a grey haze that matched his mood. In his hand, he clutched the morning edition of the London Gazette, the paper crumpled where his fingers had tightened in fury. "Have you seen this?" Lord Alexander Blackwood thrust the paper toward his solicitor, who sat uncomfortably in a wing-back chair. "They've all but declared me destitute. My lord, perhaps if you would consider, I will not sell Westmoreland Hall." Alexander cut him off, his voice like steel. "5 generations of Blackwoods have held those lands. I would sooner die than be the one to lose them." Mr. Patterson sighed, adjusting his spectacles. "Then I fear, my lord, that we must pursue the other option we discussed. Marriage." The word hung unspoken between them. Alexander turned back to the window. At 32, he had successfully avoided matrimony, preferring the freedom of bachelorhood and the varied pleasures London offered a man of his station. But his father's gambling debts, discovered only after the late Earl's death 6 months prior, had left the estate teetering on the brink of ruin. "Very well," he said at last. "Make the arrangements. But understand this, I have no interest in love. This is a business transaction, nothing more." Little did the Earl of Westmoreland know that fate, and his own heart, had other plans. In the small village of Thornfield, some 100 miles north of London, Miss Clara Fairchild sat at her father's bedside, dabbing his fevered brow with a cool cloth. The country doctor had just departed, leaving behind a bottle of medicine and a grim prognosis. "He needs rest, Miss Fairchild," the doctor had said quietly. "And treatments I fear are beyond your means." Clara glanced around the modest cottage that had been her home for all of her 20 years. The thatched roof needed repair, and the garden that once provided much of their food had withered from neglect as she devoted her time to caring for her father. "Clara, my girl," her father rasped, taking her hand in his. "You must not sacrifice your future for me." "Hush, Papa," she soothed, tucking the threadbare blanket around him. "Save your strength." Later that evening, as she sat mending by candlelight, a knock came at the door. Clara rose, smoothing her simple muslin dress, and opened it to find Mr. Winters, the village solicitor. "Miss Fairchild," he bowed slightly. "I apologize for the late hour, but I have received correspondence of the utmost importance concerning you." Clara's heart quickened. "Concerning me, sir? May I come in? What I have to discuss is rather delicate." She led him to the small sitting room, offering him the better of their 2 chairs. "I have been contacted by a Mr. Patterson of London, representing the Earl of Westmoreland." Mr. Winters extracted a letter from his coat. "It seems his lordship is seeking a bride, and your name has been put forward by your late mother's cousin, Lady Harrington." Clara blinked in confusion. She had never met Lady Harrington, knowing her only through the occasional letter and small gift at Christmas. "The Earl wishes to make you an offer of marriage, Miss Fairchild." The room seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. There must be some mistake. Why would an Earl wish to marry someone like me? Mr. Winters cleared his throat. The arrangement would be advantageous to both parties. The Earl would provide a substantial settlement, including the finest medical care for your father. In return, you would bring respectability to the match. Your mother's family, while distant, is of good standing. "This is absurd," Clara whispered. "I have never even met this man. Nevertheless, he has sent a carriage for you. It will arrive tomorrow morning to bring you to London, where the details may be discussed." After Mr. Winters departed, Clara sank into a chair, her mind whirling. Marriage to an unknown nobleman, it was preposterous, like something from a fairy tale. Yet as she looked toward her father's room, hearing his labored breathing, she knew she had no choice. Her father needed medicines they could not afford, treatments beyond their reach. By morning, Clara had made her decision. The drawing room of Lord Westmoreland's London residence was larger than Clara's entire cottage. She sat perched on the edge of a silk-upholstered chair, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Her traveling dress, though her finest, was hopelessly plain among such grandeur. The door opened, and Clara rose quickly, dipping into a curtsy as a tall, imposing figure entered the room. The Earl of Westmoreland was not what she had expected. Rather than an elderly gentleman, which she had somehow imagined, he was a man in his prime. Dark hair swept back from a face that might have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of a winter sea. He was handsome in a severe way, like a Greek statue, cold and perfect. "Miss Fairchild," he inclined his head slightly. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Yes, my lord." "Thank you." Her voice emerged steadier than she felt. He gestured for her to sit, then took the chair opposite, studying her with an appraising gaze that made her feel like a horse at auction. "I assume Mr. Winters explained the nature of my proposal?" Clara swallowed. "He mentioned an arrangement, my lord, though not the particulars." "Then allow me to be direct. I require a wife of respectable birth but modest expectations. You require funds for your father's care and your own security. I propose a marriage of convenience to satisfy both our needs." The coldness of his tone made Clara flinch. "You would have your own household allowance," he continued, "and complete freedom to manage your affairs, provided you fulfill certain obligations." "What obligations would those be, my lord?" His gaze remained impassive. "To appear at my side when society demands it. To maintain the dignity of the Westmoreland name. To eventually provide an heir. Beyond that, we need not inconvenience each other." Clara felt her cheeks flush. The clinical way he spoke of what should be sacred made something in her rebel, despite her desperate circumstances. "And if I were to decline?" she asked quietly. A flicker of surprise crossed his features, quickly masked. "Then you would return to your village with a small stipend for your trouble. But I think you will not decline, Miss Fairchild. Your father's condition requires treatments that only money can provide." The truth of his words stung. Clara looked down at her worn gloves, at the small tear she had carefully mended the night before. "When would this marriage take place?" she asked. "A special license has been arranged. We would wed within the week, then depart for Westmoreland Hall in the country. London does not agree with me at present." Clara suspected there was more to his desire to leave London than personal preference, but she did not press. Instead, she took a deep breath and made the decision that would forever alter her life. "I accept your proposal, Lord Westmoreland." His expression didn't change, but he nodded once, as if concluding a business transaction. "Very well. My housekeeper will show you to your rooms. A modiste will arrive tomorrow to begin work on your trousseau. We shall be married on Saturday." He rose, signaling the end of their interview, then paused, seeming to remember something. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "This belonged to my mother. It is customary for the Countess of Westmoreland to wear it." He opened the box to reveal a sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. Without ceremony, he took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. His touch was brief, impersonal, yet Clara felt a strange flutter in her stomach at the contact. "Good day, Miss Fairchild. Or I should say, my future countess." With that, he bowed slightly and left her alone in the vast, silent room, the weight of his ring heavy on her finger. The wedding was a quiet affair, attended only by Mr. Patterson, Lady Harrington, a formidable dowager who examined Clara with unconcealed curiosity, and a few of the Earl's acquaintances. Clara wore a gown of ivory silk, hastily made but exquisite in its simplicity. Her new husband remained as distant as ever, speaking his vows clearly but without emotion. As they rode in the carriage toward Westmoreland Hall the following day, Clara gazed out the window at the passing countryside, acutely aware of the man sitting opposite her. They had barely exchanged a dozen words since becoming man and wife, and the silence stretched between them like a physical presence. "Your father has been moved to a private sanatorium in Bath," Lord Westmoreland said suddenly. The waters there are said to be beneficial for conditions such as his. He will receive the best care available. Clara turned to him in surprise. Thank you, my lord. That is most generous. It was part of our arrangement, he replied dismissively. And you need not address me as my lord in private. Alexander will suffice. Thank you. Alexander, she said, testing the name on her tongue. You may call me Clara, if you wish. He inclined his head but made no further attempt at conversation. Clara returned her gaze to the window, wondering what kind of life awaited her as the Countess of Westmoreland. The answer became apparent as they approached the ancestral home of the Blackwood family. Westmoreland Hall rose from the surrounding parkland like something from a dream, a grand Jacobean mansion of warm golden stone, with tall mullioned windows and imposing chimneys. Yet as they drew closer, Clara noticed signs of neglect, untrimmed hedges, a fountain standing dry in the courtyard, shutters hanging askew on an upper window. A small staff greeted them upon arrival, far smaller than would be expected for an estate of this size, Clara realized. The elderly butler, Morris, seemed to bear the weight of the household on his stooped shoulders, while Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, regarded Clara with unconcealed skepticism. Welcome to Westmoreland Hall, my lady, Mrs. Winters curtsied, her voice as stiff as her posture. Clara smiled warmly. Thank you, Mrs. Winters. I look forward to learning the ways of the household from someone with your experience. Something in the woman's severe expression softened slightly, though her reply remained formal. Very good, my lady. I've prepared the Countess's chambers for you. Alexander excused himself almost immediately upon arrival, citing estate business, leaving Clara to follow Mrs. Winters through the labyrinthine corridors of what was now her home. The Countess's chambers were sumptuous, if somewhat faded, a sitting room, bedroom, and dressing room, decorated in blue and gold, with views across the formal gardens. These have not been used since the late Countess passed, some 15 years ago, Mrs. Winters explained, running a finger along a dustless surface with evident pride. We've done our best to make them ready for you. Clara noticed the tired lines around the housekeeper's eyes, the worn quality of her dress. You've done wonderfully, Mrs. Winters. I can see how hard you've worked with limited resources. The housekeeper's eyes widened slightly at Clara's perception. Times have been difficult, my lady. But we manage. I hope we might work together to make Westmoreland Hall shine again, Clara said gently. I may be new to this position, but I am willing to learn. For the first time, Mrs. Winters gave her a genuine smile. I believe we might do just that, my lady. Later that evening, Clara dined alone in the cavernous dining room, informed by Morris that his lordship would be taking his meal in his study. As she sat at one end of the massive table, the single-place setting looking lost amid the unused silver and crystal, Clara wondered if all her meals would be solitary affairs. She was finishing her dessert when the butler appeared at her elbow. His lordship requests your presence in the library, my lady, when you have finished dining. Clara dabbed her lips with her napkin and rose. I'll go now, Morris. Thank you. The library was a magnificent room, 2 stories high with galleries running around the upper level. Books lined every wall, and a fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace. Alexander stood before it, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring into the flames. You wish to see me? Clara said quietly. He turned, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Yes. There is a matter we must discuss. Clara moved further into the room, her silk evening gown rustling softly against the carpet. I have received word that Lady Pembroke's annual summer ball will take place next week, he said. As the new Countess of Westmoreland, your presence is expected. Clara felt a flutter of anxiety. I see. I have never attended such an event. I am aware of your inexperience in society. His tone made her flush. Which is why I have arranged for Lady Harrington to visit tomorrow. She will instruct you in the necessary protocols and behaviors expected of a countess. Clara lifted her chin. I may be from the country, my lord, but I am not incapable of learning. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps. I did not suggest otherwise. However, the Tun can be merciless to those they perceive as outsiders. I would spare you that, if possible. The unexpected consideration in his words caught her off guard. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once, then turned back to the fire. That will be all. Good night, Clara. Dismissed like a servant, Clara felt a surge of frustration. This was to be her marriage, formal exchanges and polite distance. Is that how it will always be between us? She asked suddenly. He looked back at her, one eyebrow raised. I beg your pardon? Will you always dismiss me when our business is concluded? Are we never to converse as people who share a life? Alexander regarded her with those cool gray eyes. We made an arrangement, Clara. You have your duties, and I have mine. I did not think you harbored romantic notions about our union. Not romantic notions, no, she replied. But I had hoped we might at least be friendly toward one another. We are, after all, bound together for life. He seemed to consider her words. Very well. Would you care for a glass of sherry before retiring? It was a small concession, but Clara recognized it as significant from a man so reserved. Yes, thank you. I would like that. As Alexander poured her drink, Clara took the opportunity to study him more closely. In the firelight, his features seemed less harsh, and she noticed lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of worries he kept hidden. Have you always lived at Westmoreland Hall? She asked, accepting the glass. Until I was sent to Eton at 10, yes. After that, I divided my time between here and London. He gestured toward a chair, and Clara sat, surprised by this small courtesy. It must have been wonderful, growing up in such a place, she said, gazing around at the magnificent library. A shadow crossed his face. It was different then. Clara sensed she had touched on something painful and changed direction. I noticed the rose garden from my window. It must be lovely in full bloom. My mother designed it, Alexander said, his voice softening imperceptibly. She had a passion for roses. The garden has been neglected since her death, I'm afraid. Perhaps I might restore it, Clara suggested. I've always loved gardening. He looked at her with mild surprise. If it would please you, by all means. They sat in silence for a few moments, but it felt less strained than before. Tell me of your father, Alexander said suddenly. Clara warmed at the question, the first personal interest he had shown. He was a schoolmaster before his illness. He taught me everything I know, literature, history, even some mathematics and Latin. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. An unusual education for a young woman. Papa believed that a woman's mind deserves cultivation as much as a man's, Clara replied, a note of pride in her voice. My mother died when I was young, so he raised me himself. That explains much, Alexander murmured, almost to himself. What does it explain, my lord? He studied her over the rim of his glass. Why, you are not what I expected. Before Clara could ask what he had expected, Alexander rose. It grows late. I will bid you good night. Clara stood as well, handing him her empty glass. Good night, Alexander. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Clara. She looked back, her heart quickening inexplicably. The ball. Do not concern yourself overmuch. You will do well enough. It was hardly effusive praise, but coming from him, it felt significant. Clara smiled. Thank you. As she made her way back to her chambers, Clara reflected that while theirs was a marriage of convenience, perhaps it need not be entirely without warmth. Lady Harrington proved to be a demanding but effective teacher. For 5 days, she drilled Clara on the proper forms of address for various ranks of nobility, the intricacies of dinner service, the rules of precedence, and 100 other details of aristocratic life. Back straight, chin up, but eyes modestly lowered, the dowager instructed as Clara practiced walking across the drawing room. You must appear confident but not bold, my dear. Society forgives much in a beautiful woman, but never vulgarity. Clara bit back a sigh. Yes, Lady Harrington. And you must call me Aunt Augusta in private, the older woman said unexpectedly. We are family now, after all. Touched by this small kindness, Clara smiled. Thank you, Aunt Augusta. The day of Lady Pembroke's ball arrived with alarming swiftness. Clara stood before the mirror in her dressing room, hardly recognizing the elegant woman reflected there. Her gown was of the finest blue silk, its color bringing out the golden highlights in her brown hair, which had been arranged in fashionable ringlets by the lady's maid Alexander had hired from London. You look quite transformed, my dear, Lady Harrington declared, fastening a sapphire necklace, another Westmoreland heirloom, around Clara's throat. Alexander will be pleased. Clara doubted her appearance would elicit any particular reaction from her husband, who remained as distant as ever, despite their brief moment of connection in the library. They had barely seen each other in the days since, as he was frequently absent on estate business. When she descended the grand staircase, however, Alexander was waiting at the bottom, resplendent in formal evening attire. He looked up as she approached, and for the first time, Clara saw genuine surprise register on his face. My lord, she curtsied slightly when she reached him. Clara, he replied, his voice unusually soft. Then, seeming to recollect himself, he offered his arm. The carriage awaits. As they drove through the summer twilight, Clara's nervousness grew. Will there be many people I should know? Half the county, at least, Alexander replied. But you need only be civil. No one expects deep conversation at these affairs. And if they ask about our courtship? His mouth tightened. Say as little as possible. Lady Harrington has spread the story that we met through her and formed an attachment during my period of mourning for my father, hence the quiet wedding. Clara nodded, grateful for the plausible fiction. I shall try not to disappoint you. Alexander gave her a sidelong glance. You have shown yourself to be a quick study, Clara. I do not anticipate disappointment. The compliment, meager though it was, bolstered her confidence. Lady Pembroke's country estate blazed with light as they approached, carriages lined up along the circular drive. Footmen in powdered wigs and livery assisted guests from their conveyances, while inside, the sounds of music and laughter spilled from open windows. As they entered the ballroom, a hush fell over the nearest guests, followed by a wave of whispers. Clara felt dozens of curious eyes upon her as the butler announced, the Earl and Countess of Westmoreland. Lady Pembroke, a plump, bejeweled woman in her 50s, rushed forward to greet them. Lord Westmoreland. How delightful that you could join us. And this must be your bride. My dear, you are enchanting. Clara curtsied. You are most kind, Lady Pembroke. Thank you for including us in your lovely gathering. Such charming manners. Lady Pembroke declared, loud enough for those nearby to hear. You must tell me how you stole the heart of our most confirmed bachelor. Before Clara could respond, Alexander intervened smoothly. My wife is too modest to boast of her conquest, Lady Pembroke. Suffice it to say, I was thoroughly vanquished. Lady Pembroke tittered with delight, while Clara glanced at Alexander in surprise. His face revealed nothing, but she felt his hand press slightly against the small of her back, guiding her further into the room. Well played, he murmured near her ear. Continue as you have begun, and we shall survive the evening. For the next hour, Clara was introduced to a blur of names and titles, each new acquaintance more curious than the last about the Earl's mysterious country bride. She responded with the quiet dignity Lady Harrington had instilled in her, neither too familiar nor too reserved, and gradually felt the initial tension in the room dissipate. Not everyone was so easily won over, however. As Clara stood with a group of ladies while Alexander fetched her a glass of champagne, she overheard a cutting remark from behind a fan. One wonders what charms the little country mouse possesses to have captured an earl, a voice drawled. Perhaps talents best not discussed in polite company? Clara felt her cheeks flush, but before she could turn, another voice responded. Lady Blackwood, I would advise against maligning the character of the Countess of Westmoreland in my presence. Clara turned to find Alexander standing there, his expression glacial as he handed her a glass. The woman who had spoken, a stunning redhead in a revealing green gown, smiled insincerely. Alexander, darling, I meant no offense. Merely wondering at the unexpected nature of your marriage. Lady Blackwood is my cousin's widow, Alexander explained to Clara, his tone clipped. She believes our family connection grants her liberties it does not. The beautiful widow's smile hardened. We were more than family once, Alexander. Or have you forgotten? Clara felt suddenly uncomfortable, caught in what was clearly an intimate history. If you'll excuse us, Lady Blackwood, Alexander said coldly, placing Clara's hand on his arm. My wife has promised me the next dance. As he led her toward the dance floor, Clara glanced up at her husband's taut profile. You didn't mention we would be dancing. We weren't, he replied tersely. But it seemed the quickest way to extract ourselves from an unpleasant situation. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and Alexander drew Clara into his arms with unexpected grace. Despite her nervousness, she found herself following his lead effortlessly as they moved across the polished floor. You dance well, he observed, surprise evident in his voice. Papa insisted I learn, Clara replied. He said music and dance cultivate the soul. Your father sounds like a remarkable man. He is, she said softly. Thank you again for arranging his care. Alexander's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something unguarded flickered in their depths. You need not thank me for honoring our agreement. The waltz ended too soon, and Alexander led Clara from the floor. For the remainder of the evening, he remained uncharacteristically attentive, never straying far from her side. Clara wasn't sure if this was protective instinct after Lady Blackwood's rudeness or a calculated display for the benefit of the gossiping ton, but she found herself enjoying his company nonetheless. As they rode home through the darkness, Clara broached the subject that had been troubling her. Lady Blackwood seemed quite familiar with you. Alexander stiffened beside her. Victorine and I had a brief liaison some years ago, before her marriage to my cousin. It meant nothing. She seems to believe otherwise. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Victorine has expensive tastes and limited means since my cousin's death. No doubt she hoped to rekindle our relationship for financial reasons. I see. Clara looked out the window, unsure why this information troubled her. Does that disturb you? Alexander asked, studying her profile in the dim light. Clara considered the question. I have no right to judge your past, my lord. Our marriage is not conventional. No, he agreed quietly. It is not. They rode in silence for several minutes before Alexander spoke again. You acquitted yourself admirably tonight, Clara. Several people commented on your grace and poise. The unexpected praise warmed her. Thank you. I tried to remember everything Lady Harrington taught me. It was more than that, he said thoughtfully. You have a natural dignity that cannot be taught. Clara glanced at him in surprise, but his face was turned away, looking out into the night. When they arrived home, Alexander escorted her to the foot of the grand staircase. Good night, Clara. Good night, Alexander. She turned to go, then paused. May I ask you something? You may. Why did you tell Lady Pembroke that I had vanquished you? You could have given a less romantic explanation for our marriage. Alexander's expression was unreadable in the dim light of the entrance hall. I merely gave her the story she wished to hear. Society prefers romance to reality. Of course, Clara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment at his practical answer. How foolish of me to ask. As she climbed the stairs, she felt his eyes following her but did not look back. The weeks that followed brought a gradual shift in the atmosphere at Westmoreland Hall. Clara, determined to make herself useful, began taking an active interest in the household's management. She worked closely with Mrs. Winters to reorganize the depleted staff, making the most of limited resources. The servants, initially wary of their new mistress, slowly warmed to her practical approach and genuine concern for their welfare. In the mornings, Clara could often be found in the overgrown rose garden, her hands gloved but muddied as she pruned and weeded alongside the elderly gardener, Mr. Hayes. Bit by bit, the garden's structure began to emerge from the wilderness, revealing the elegant design Alexander's mother had created. Alexander himself remained an enigma. Some days he was almost companionable, joining Clara for dinner and engaging her in conversation about books or music. Other times he would disappear for days on estate business, leaving only a brief note of explanation. Clara tried to tell herself that this inconsistency did not trouble her, that theirs was a marriage of convenience, not affection. Yet she could not deny the pleasure she felt in his company, nor the disappointment when he withdrew. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the library windows, Clara sat curled in a window seat with a volume of poetry. She had discovered that the Westmoreland Library contained treasures beyond counting, and she had taken to spending her free hours exploring its shelves. The door opened, and Alexander entered, raindrops glistening in his dark hair. He stopped short when he saw her. "Forgive me," he said stiffly. "I did not mean to disturb your reading." Clara smiled. "You haven't disturbed me at all. Please, join me if you wish." After a moment's hesitation, he crossed to the fireplace, warming his hands. "What are you reading?" She held up the book. "Wordsworth. I find his descriptions of nature most affecting." "My mother was fond of the romantic poets," Alexander said, almost to himself. Clara closed the book. "Tell me about her." He glanced at her in surprise. "Why?" "Because she was important to you," Clara replied simply. "And because this was her home, as it is now mine. I would like to know something of the woman who came before me." Alexander was silent for so long that Clara thought he would refuse. Then he moved to sit in the chair opposite her. "Her name was Elizabeth," he began quietly. "She came from a distinguished but impoverished family. My father married her for her connections rather than her dowry, which was modest. They were not well suited. My father preferred London and its diversions. My mother loved the country, especially this house." "Like you," Clara observed. Alexander looked startled, as if this similarity had never occurred to him. "I suppose that's true. She made Westmoreland Hall a home. She loved music and poetry and growing things." His voice softened with memory. The rose garden was her pride. She would spend hours there, even in winter, planning for the next season's blooms. "What happened to her?" Clara asked gently. "A fever took her when I was 15, he replied, his voice flat. My father was in London at the time. He did not return for the funeral." Clara's heart ached at the picture his words painted, a lonely boy grieving without comfort. "I'm so sorry, Alexander." He shook his head, as if dismissing her sympathy. "It was long ago. Yet it shapes who we are," she said softly. "My mother's death when I was 8 left my father and me alone in the world. It made us cling to each other all the more fiercely." Alexander studied her face. "You miss him greatly." "I do. Though the letters from his doctors are encouraging. The treatments seem to be helping." "I'm glad to hear it," he said, and Clara believed he meant it. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the patter of rain and the occasional crack of the fire. Clara found herself wishing that all their interactions could be like this, open, unguarded. "The household staff speaks highly of you," Alexander said suddenly. "Mrs. Winters tells me you have made remarkable improvements in the management of the house." Clara blushed at the unexpected praise. "I've merely tried to be useful." Mrs. Winters has been most helpful in showing me how things should be done. Nonetheless, I am grateful. He seemed to struggle with the word. Westmoreland Hall has been neglected for too long. It's a magnificent home, Clara said earnestly. It deserves to be properly cared for. Alexander rose and moved to the window, looking out at the rain-swept grounds. My father left the estate in dire straits. The debts were substantial. Clara sat very still, sensing that this rare confidence was significant. That is why I sought a marriage of convenience, he continued, his back to her. The settlements from your mother's family, modest though they were, helped stave off the most pressing creditors. But there is much work to be done if Westmoreland is to thrive again. I had guessed as much, Clara said quietly. The reduced staff, the untended grounds. But Alexander, why did you not tell me the full extent of the situation? I am your wife, after all, even if only by arrangement. He turned to face her, his expression guarded. I did not wish to burden you with concerns that are not of your making. But they are my concerns now, she insisted. I may not have been born to this life, but I understand household economy. Perhaps if I knew more about the estate's finances, I could help make economies that would ease your burden. Alexander regarded her with a mixture of surprise and what might have been respect. You continue to astonish me, Clara. Is that a good thing? She asked, a small smile playing at her lips. I believe it may be. The corner of his mouth lifted in what was almost a smile. Very well. Tomorrow we shall review the estate books together. But I warn you, they make for grim reading. Clara's heart lightened at this small victory. Then we shall face the grimness together. Later that evening, as Clara prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the changes in her relationship with Alexander. There was a growing ease between them, a foundation of mutual respect that might, in time, become something like friendship. It was far more than she had dared hope for when she had entered into their arrangement. What she did not acknowledge, even to herself, was the flutter in her heart when he almost smiled at her, or the way her skin tingled when their hands accidentally touched over dinner. Such feelings had no place in a marriage of convenience. The following weeks saw Alexander and Clara working side by side to restore Westmoreland's fortunes. Each morning they would meet in his study, poring over account books and correspondence. Clara proved to have a keen head for figures and practical economies, identifying savings that Alexander, with his aristocratic upbringing, had never considered. We could reduce the coal usage significantly by closing off the unused wings of the house for winter, she suggested one morning. And I've spoken with Mr. Hayes about expanding the kitchen gardens to provide more of our own produce. Alexander nodded approvingly. Sensible measures. And what of your plans for the rose garden? I notice work continues there. The roses require little expense beyond labor, which Mr. Hayes and I provide ourselves, Clara explained. And I thought. I hoped it might please you to see your mother's creation restored. Alexander's expression softened. It does please me, Clara. More than I can express. As autumn approached, signs of improvement began to appear throughout Westmoreland Hall. The most pressing repairs to the roof and chimneys had been completed before the weather turned. The staff, though still smaller than the estate's heyday, moved with renewed purpose. Even Alexander seemed less burdened, occasionally joining Clara for walks in the garden or rides across the estate. It was during one such ride, on a crisp September morning, that Alexander revealed unexpected news. I've had a letter from Lady Harrington, he said as they walked their horses along a wooded path. She wishes us to join her in London for the little season. Clara's heart sank. Though she had managed one country ball, the thought of London society filled her with dread. Must we go? There is still so much to be done here. I fear we must, Alexander replied. There are matters of business I need to attend to in town. And Lady Harrington has been most insistent. She says it's time for you to be properly introduced to society as the Countess of Westmoreland. Clara sighed. I suppose it was inevitable. When would we leave? Next week, if the weather holds. He glanced at her troubled face. Does the prospect displease you so much? It's not that, Clara said hesitantly. It's just. Westmoreland has begun to feel like home. And in London, there will be people like Lady Blackwood, judging me, finding me wanting. Alexander reined his horse to a stop, reaching over to touch her gloved hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Clara looked up in surprise. You have nothing to fear from the likes of Lady Blackwood, he said firmly. You are the Countess of Westmoreland, and you have shown yourself more worthy of the title than many born to nobility. His words warmed her, but Clara shook her head. You are kind to say so, but we both know that society measures worth differently. Then society is wrong, Alexander said with unexpected vehemence. Then, more gently, I will be at your side, Clara. You will not face London alone. The promise in his words made her heart flutter traitorously. Thank you, Alexander. He held her gaze a moment longer than necessary, then turned his horse back toward the house. We should return. The wind grows chill. As they rode, Clara found herself wondering at the change in Alexander. The cold, distant man who had proposed their arrangement months ago was gradually being replaced by someone more complex, still reserved, still proper, but capable of kindness and even, occasionally, warmth. It was a dangerous observation for a woman who had promised herself she would not develop tender feelings for her husband of convenience. London in October was a grey affair, wrapped in fog and soot. The Westmoreland townhouse in Berkeley Square had been closed up for months, and despite the servants' best efforts, a musty chill pervaded the rooms when Clara and Alexander arrived. Lady Harrington descended upon them the very next morning, bringing with her a whirlwind of activity. My dear, your country wardrobe simply will not do for town, she declared, examining Clara's gowns with a critical eye. We must visit Madame de la Rose immediately. And there are calls to be made, cards to be left. The Countess of Westmoreland cannot skulk in Berkeley Square like a hermit. Clara threw a pleading glance at Alexander, who merely raised an eyebrow in amusement. I leave you in my aunt's capable hands, he said, reaching for his hat. I have business at my solicitor's. And so began Clara's initiation into London society. For the next fortnight, she was swept from modistes to milliners, from morning calls to afternoon teas. Lady Harrington proved a formidable chaperone, steering Clara through potentially treacherous social waters with the skill of a seasoned navigator. Keep your chin up when Lady Moreton addresses you, she would murmur behind her fan. She respects nothing but pride. And for heaven's sake, say nothing about politics when Lord Cavendish is present. Clara absorbed these lessons gratefully, recognizing the genuine affection behind Lady Harrington's brusque manner. Slowly, she began to find her footing in this new world. Alexander, meanwhile, was frequently absent on mysterious business. When Clara inquired about his activities, he provided only vague answers about investments and meetings with bankers. She worried about the strain she sometimes glimpsed in his face when he thought himself unobserved, but he rebuffed her gentle attempts to discuss it. Their relationship, which had begun to thaw at Westmoreland Hall, seemed to revert to formal politeness in London. They occupied separate bedchambers, as they had in the country, but here the distance between them felt greater. Clara told herself it didn't matter, that their arrangement had never promised more than mutual respect, yet she could not deny the ache of disappointment. The true test of Clara's newfound social skills came with Lady Harrington's musical evening, a gathering of 30 of London's most influential figures. As hostess, Clara greeted each guest with the composed dignity she had cultivated, while Alexander stood at her side, the perfect image of a devoted husband. You're doing admirably, he murmured at one point, his breath warm against her ear. Lady Harrington is positively preening with pride. Clara smiled up at him. It is all her doing. She has been the most patient of teachers. I think you underestimate your own natural grace, he replied, and Clara felt herself flush at the unexpected compliment. The evening progressed smoothly until the arrival of a late guest, Lady Blackwood, resplendent in a gown of deep burgundy that displayed her considerable charms to advantage. Clara felt Alexander tense beside her. "Victorine," he acknowledged coolly. "I was not aware you had been invited." Lady Blackwood smiled, her green eyes moving from Alexander to Clara with calculated assessment. "Dear Augusta has always been fond of me. And I could hardly miss the opportunity to see the new Countess presiding over her first London gathering." The emphasis she placed on new carried volumes of disdain. Clara straightened her spine. "How kind of you to come, Lady Blackwood," she said pleasantly. "Please, enjoy the music. Miss Fairweather is about to perform a piece by Chopin." Lady Blackwood raised an eyebrow at the dismissal but moved into the drawing room. Alexander gave Clara a look of surprised approval. "Well handled," he murmured. Clara shrugged slightly. "Lady Harrington advised me that the best defense against rudeness is serene politeness. A strategy my aunt has perfected over decades," Alexander said with a hint of a smile. As the evening wore on, Clara noticed Lady Blackwood in frequent, seemingly casual conversation with Alexander. Though he appeared unmoved by her attentions, Clara couldn't help the twist of jealousy in her stomach. Lady Blackwood was everything she was not: sophisticated, worldly, and undeniably beautiful. Later, as the guests were departing, Clara overheard Lady Blackwood's low voice as she spoke to Alexander in the entrance hall. "I have information that might interest you greatly, Alexander. About Lord Pembroke's investment in the railway. Perhaps you might call on me tomorrow to discuss it?" Clara didn't hear Alexander's response, but the familiar way Lady Blackwood touched his arm made her heart sink. She turned away, busying herself with thanking departing guests, and did not see the way Alexander removed Victorine's hand from his sleeve. That night, as Clara's maid helped her prepare for bed, she found herself dwelling on the evening's events. Had she been foolish to think that her relationship with Alexander was developing into something more than a business arrangement? In the country, away from society's eyes, he had shown her glimpses of a different man. But here in London, surrounded by women like Lady Blackwood, perhaps he regretted binding himself to a simple country girl. A knock at her door interrupted these melancholy thoughts. Dismissing her maid, Clara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and opened the door to find Alexander standing there, still in his evening clothes. "May I speak with you?" he asked quietly. Surprised, Clara stepped back. "Of course." He entered her sitting room but remained standing, his posture tense. "I wanted to commend you on tonight's success. You were everything a hostess should be." "Thank you," Clara said, puzzled by his formal tone. "Is that all you wished to say?" Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomfort. "No. I also wanted to assure you that there is nothing between Lady Blackwood and myself. Her attempts to secure my attention are unwelcome." Clara's heart quickened. "You owe me no explanations about your dealings with Lady Blackwood or any other person." "Perhaps not," he agreed. "But I find I wish to give them nonetheless." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken words. "Alexander," Clara began hesitantly. "May I ask why you chose me? Out of all the women you might have made your countess, why a country girl with no fortune or connections of consequence?" He seemed taken aback by the question. "I told you from the beginning. I needed a wife of respectable birth but modest expectations." "Yes, but there must have been others who fit that description." "Why me specifically?" Alexander moved to the window, looking out at the darkened square. "Lady Harrington showed me your miniature," he said at last. "It was painted when you were 16, I believe. A gift to your mother's family." Clara nodded, remembering the tiny portrait her father had commissioned with money he could ill afford, to send to her mother's relatives. "There was something in your eyes," Alexander continued softly. "A quietness, a dignity. You looked kind. And I found I wanted kindness in my life, after years of its absence." The unexpected vulnerability in his confession made Clara's throat tighten with emotion. "Oh," she whispered. Alexander turned to face her, his expression once again composed. It grows late. I should let you rest. As he moved toward the door, Clara found the courage to speak. Alexander? He paused, looking back at her. I'm glad you chose me, she said simply. Something flickered in his eyes of warmth, perhaps, or longing, but it was gone too quickly to name. As am I, Clara. Good night. After he left, Clara stood in the center of her room, her heart full of confused emotions. Their marriage might have begun as an arrangement, but something was changing between them. What that something was, and whether it could ever bridge the gap from convenience to true connection, remained to be seen. The following afternoon found Clara alone in the drawing room, writing letters, when Morris announced a visitor. Lady Blackwood, my lady. Clara looked up in surprise as Victorine swept into the room, elegantly attired in a walking dress of deep green velvet. Lady Blackwood, Clara rose, maintaining her composure despite her dismay at this unexpected call. This is a surprise. I'm sure it is, Victorine replied, removing her gloves with deliberate slowness. Is Alexander at home? My husband is out on business, Clara said, emphasizing the word husband slightly. May I be of assistance? Victorine smiled, a predatory curve of painted lips. Actually, my dear, I believe you can. You see, I've come to discuss your marriage. Clara's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. I was not aware that my marriage was a matter for discussion. Oh, come now, Victorine laughed, the sound like glass breaking. Surely you don't expect anyone to believe that Alexander Blackwood, Earl of Westmoreland, fell madly in love with a penniless nobody from the country? London has been buzzing with speculation since your unexpected union. Clara felt each word like a slap, but she refused to show it. I'm afraid I don't concern myself with gossip, Lady Blackwood. How virtuous, Victorine mocked. But let us be frank. Alexander married you because he needed money. My late husband, his cousin, left me well provided for. I could have helped him, had he asked. Instead, he chose to shackle himself to a woman so obviously beneath him. Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them tightly in her lap. If you've come to insult me in my own home, Lady Blackwood, I must ask you to leave. Not an insult, my dear. Merely a statement of fact. Victorine moved closer, her voice softening to false sympathy. You must know he doesn't love you. Alexander is capable of great passion, I know this intimately, but never with someone so ordinary. Clara stood, her patience at an end. Lady Blackwood, I believe this conversation has concluded. Morris will show you out. Victorine's eyes narrowed. He will tire of you, you know. Playing at marriage with his country mouse. And when he does, I will be waiting. Alexander and I have a connection that predates you, and will outlast you. That is for my husband to decide, Clara replied, her voice steady despite the pain Victorine's words inflicted. Good day, Lady Blackwood. After Victorine had departed, Clara sank back onto the sofa, her composure finally cracking. The doubts she had been holding at bay came flooding back. Was her marriage truly the laughingstock of London? Did Alexander regret their union when faced with women like Victorine? Worse, was Victorine right about his feelings? Clara had begun to hope that Alexander might be developing some affection for her, but perhaps she had merely been seeing what she wished to see. When Alexander returned home that evening, Clara was quieter than usual at dinner. He noticed her subdued manner but attributed it to fatigue from their busy social schedule. I've arranged for us to attend the opera tomorrow night, he mentioned as they took coffee in the drawing room. Rossini's The Barber of Seville. I thought you might enjoy it. That sounds lovely, Clara replied, trying to summon enthusiasm. Though perhaps you would prefer to attend with someone more knowledgeable about music. Alexander looked at her curiously. Why would I wish that? Your company is perfectly satisfactory. The faint praise stung after Victorine's visit. Merely satisfactory? How flattering. Her sarcastic tone took him aback. Clara, what's troubling you? You've been out of sorts all evening. She set down her cup with a clatter. Lady Blackwood called today. Alexander's expression darkened. What did she want? To make it abundantly clear that I am an object of ridicule in society, and that you will inevitably tire of your country mouse and return to her superior charms. Victorine said that to you? Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. Among other things, Clara said, rising and moving to the fireplace to hide the tears threatening to fall. The worst part is, I cannot entirely dismiss her words. We both know our marriage was a business transaction. You needed funds, I needed security for my father. Clara, no, please, she cut him off, turning to face him. I don't regret our arrangement. You've been honorable in fulfilling your part of it. But Lady Blackwood made me realize that I've been foolish, imagining that there might eventually be more between us. Alexander stood, his face taut with emotion. You've been imagining no such thing. Clara's heart stuttered. What do you mean? He moved toward her slowly, as if approaching a startled deer. I mean that our relationship has become more than the arrangement we initially agreed upon. At least, it has for me. Alexander, Clara whispered, hardly daring to hope. What are you saying? He took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. I'm saying that Lady Blackwood is wrong. About everything. Yes, I married you for practical reasons. But I have come to care for you, Clara. More deeply than I ever anticipated. Clara's eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of insincerity. You speak of caring, but is that all? Alexander's gaze held hers, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. I don't know how to speak of softer emotions. They were not encouraged in my upbringing. But I know that the thought of you believing Victorine's poisonous words is intolerable to me. He raised one hand to brush a tear from her cheek. You are not beneath me, Clara. If anything, your kindness, your intelligence, your quiet strength make me wonder if I am worthy of you. Clara's heart felt too full for her chest. I have come to care for you too, Alexander. Very much. His expression softened in a way she had never seen before. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and Clara felt herself melting into it, her hands moving to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. When they finally parted, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I should have done that long ago, he murmured. Clara smiled, a happiness she had never expected blooming in her chest. Better late than never, my lord. He laughed, a rich sound she had rarely heard from him. Indeed, my lady. Later that night, as Clara prepared for bed, she found herself thinking not of Victorine's cruel words but of Alexander's tender ones. Their marriage had begun as an arrangement of convenience, but it was transforming into something neither of them had anticipated, a true partnership, built on respect and growing affection. As for whether that affection might someday deepen into love, Clara allowed herself, for the first time, to hope. The following week brought a drastic change in the household's atmosphere. Alexander and Clara attended social events together as before, but now there was a new warmth between them, noticed and remarked upon by London society. Lady Harrington observed the change with knowing eyes but said nothing, merely smiling to herself when she saw Alexander's hand lingering on Clara's or the way Clara's face brightened when her husband entered a room. Victorine, when they encountered her at a dinner party, regarded them with barely concealed fury, especially when Alexander pointedly guided Clara away from her presence. Later that evening, he told Clara of his decision to cut all ties with Lady Blackwood. She has caused you pain, he said simply. That is unforgivable. Clara touched his arm gently. You need not banish her on my account. I can weather a few unpleasant remarks. Alexander covered her hand with his. It is not merely on your account. Victorine has manipulated and schemed since my cousin's death. I should have distanced myself from her long ago. Their quiet happiness was interrupted, however, by an unexpected letter from Mr. Patterson, Alexander's solicitor. After reading it, Alexander's face became grave. "What is it?" Clara asked, concerned by his expression. "Business matters," he replied vaguely. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Clara was not so easily dismissed now. "Alexander, we agreed to face difficulties together. Please don't shut me out." He sighed, recognizing the justice in her words. "Very well. It seems one of my father's largest creditors is calling in his loan. Unless we can repay the sum within 30 days, Westmoreland Hall could be at risk." Clara paled. "But I thought we had managed to stabilize the estate's finances." "We have made progress," Alexander acknowledged. "But this debt predates our marriage. My father borrowed heavily from Lord Pembroke, using Westmoreland as collateral. I had hoped to negotiate an extension, but it seems Pembroke is in financial difficulties of his own and needs immediate repayment." Clara's mind raced. "How much is required?" Alexander named a sum that made her gasp. "Even if we sold every jewel I own, it wouldn't be enough." "No," Alexander agreed grimly. "And I will not ask that of you. The jewels are Westmoreland heirlooms, meant for future generations." The mention of future generations brought a flush to Clara's cheeks, but she focused on the matter at hand. "There must be something we can do. Some asset we could liquidate temporarily." Alexander shook his head. "I've explored every avenue. The only option would be to sell a portion of the estate lands, which I am loath to do. Those farms have been in my family for centuries." Clara bit her lip, thinking. What if I asked my father for help?" Alexander looked at her in surprise. "Your father? I don't understand." "The treatments in Bath have been successful," Clara explained. "His last letter mentioned that he has resumed teaching, though on a limited basis. He has friends from his university days, one of whom is now quite wealthy. Perhaps he might be willing to lend assistance, for my father's sake." Alexander's expression softened. "Clara, I cannot ask this of you. The burden of my family's debts should not fall on your shoulders." "But we are family now," she said simply. "Your burdens are mine, as mine are yours. At least let me write to Papa and ask." Moved by her loyalty, Alexander took her hand and pressed it to his lips. "You humble me, Clara. Write to your father, if you wish. But know that whatever comes, we will face it together." 2 days later, Clara received a reply from her father that brought tears to her eyes. She found Alexander in his study, poring over account books with a furrowed brow. "Papa has written back," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Alexander looked up, immediately alert to her emotion. "What does he say?" Clara handed him the letter. "Read it yourself." Alexander scanned the pages, his expression changing from curiosity to disbelief. "This cannot be right. Your father says his friend, Sir William Hargrove, is prepared to advance the full amount we need, with favorable terms for repayment." "Yes," Clara confirmed. "Sir William was Papa's roommate at Cambridge. They've maintained a correspondence all these years. When Papa explained our situation, Sir William offered his help immediately." Alexander shook his head in wonder. "But why would he do this?" "He doesn't know me." "He knows me," Clara said softly. "He was present at my christening. And he says in his letter to Papa that any man fortunate enough to have me as his wife deserves whatever help can be given." Alexander set the letter down, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He is right about that, at least." Rising from his desk, he crossed to Clara and took both her hands in his. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," she replied. "This is what marriage means, supporting each other through difficulties." Alexander gazed at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "Clara, a knock at the study door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Morris entered, looking apologetic. Forgive the intrusion, my lord, but Lady Harrington has arrived and insists on speaking with you both immediately. Lady Harrington swept in before Alexander could respond, her face unusually grave. Alexander, Clara, my dears. I'm afraid I bring troubling news. Clara felt Alexander's hand tighten around hers. What is it, Aunt? It's all over London, Lady Harrington said, sinking into a chair. Victorine has been spreading the most vicious rumors about your marriage. She claims it was nothing but a financial arrangement, that Clara's family paid you to take her off their hands. Clara gasped. That's the opposite of the truth. Since when has truth mattered to gossips? Lady Harrington shook her head. But there's worse. She hints that the marriage remains unconsummated, that it is a sham designed to secure your position while you continue to pursue other interests. Alexander's face darkened with fury. She goes too far. I'll call on her immediately and put an end to this. No, Lady Harrington held up a hand. That would only lend credence to her tales. There is only one way to counter such malicious gossip. She fixed them both with a stern gaze. You must present a united front. Appear everywhere together, show the world that yours is a true marriage, born of affection. But our private life is no one's business, Clara protested. My dear, you became public property the moment you married an earl, Lady Harrington said gently. Fair or not, that is the reality of your position. After Lady Harrington departed, Clara and Alexander remained in the study, the weight of this new challenge heavy between them. I'm so sorry, Clara said at last. If you had married someone of your own class, you wouldn't face such scandal. Alexander turned to her, his expression fierce. Never say that. I do not regret our marriage, Clara. Not for a moment. Even now, with your reputation at stake? Especially now. He took her face in his hands. Victorine's rumors can only hurt us if we give them power. And I refuse to do so. Clara searched his face. What shall we do, then? Exactly as Aunt Augusta suggested, Alexander replied. We shall show London that our marriage is real and strong. Beginning tonight, at the Wintertons' ball. That evening, Clara dressed with particular care, choosing a gown of deep crimson silk that set off her dark hair and fair complexion to advantage. When she descended the stairs to find Alexander waiting, his admiring gaze made her blush. You look magnificent, he said, offering his arm. As do you, she replied, taking in his formal evening attire, which emphasized his broad shoulders and lean strength. The Wintertons' ball was one of the most anticipated events of the little season, and the ballroom was crowded with the cream of society when they arrived. Clara felt the weight of curious stares as they entered, and heard the murmur of whispers. Alexander's hand tightened reassuringly on hers. Ignore them, he murmured. Tonight, we dance only with each other. And dance they did. Alexander led Clara through waltz after waltz, holding her closer than was strictly proper, his eyes never leaving hers. To those watching, there could be no doubt about the connection between the Earl and his country bride. During a brief respite, as they sipped champagne in an alcove, Clara spotted Victorine across the room, her face tight with thwarted malice. She doesn't look pleased with our display, Clara observed. Alexander didn't even glance in Victorine's direction. I find I don't care in the slightest how she looks. The only person in this room who matters to me is you. Clara's heart skipped at the sincerity in his voice. Alexander. Clara, he said softly, setting down his glass and taking her hand. There is something I should have told you before now. Something I've been afraid to acknowledge, even to myself. She looked up at him, hardly daring to breathe. What is that? I love you. The words were simple, direct, stripped of pretense. I think I began to fall in love with you that day in the rose garden, when you spoke so passionately about restoring my mother's creation. You saw beauty where I had only seen decay. You brought light back into my life when I didn't even realize how dark it had become. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. Oh, Alexander. I love you too. I've loved you for months, but I was afraid to hope you might ever return my feelings. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. Then we have both been fools. But no longer. In full view of London society, Alexander Blackwood, Earl of Westmoreland, bent and kissed his wife with undisguised tenderness. The whispers around them crescendoed, but neither of them heard, lost as they were in each other. Later that night, as their carriage rolled toward Berkeley Square, Clara nestled against her husband's side, his arm warm around her shoulders. "Do you think we've silenced the gossips?" she asked. Alexander chuckled. "If not, we've certainly given them something new to talk about." Clara looked up at him, her heart full. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "we return to Westmoreland Hall and begin our life together properly. Not as two people bound by an arrangement, but as husband and wife in truth." "I would like that very much," Clara whispered. Alexander's kiss was a promise of all that awaited them. "As would I, my love." "As would I." Spring came early to Westmoreland Hall, coaxing forth buds and blossoms across the estate. In the rose garden, which had been Clara's labor of love throughout the previous summer and autumn, the first green shoots were appearing, promising a glorious display in the months to come. Clara walked among the neat beds, one hand resting lightly on her swelling abdomen, the other holding a letter from her father. The news it contained made her smile. He was fully recovered and planning to visit his daughter and son-in-law before the baby's arrival in July. So much had changed in the year since she had first come to Westmoreland as a bride of convenience. The estate, while not yet restored to its former glory, was steadily improving. Alexander had repaid Sir William's loan ahead of schedule, thanks to prudent management and several successful investments. The staff had expanded modestly, and the neglected wings of the house had been reopened one by one. But the greatest transformation had been in their marriage. What had begun as a practical arrangement had blossomed into a deep and abiding love. Alexander was not demonstrative by nature, but in private, he showed Clara a tenderness that still made her heart race. And in public, his obvious pride in his wife had silenced even the most persistent gossips. "I thought I might find you here," Alexander's voice came from behind her. Clara turned to see her husband approaching, his face lighting with the smile he reserved only for her. "The roses called to me," she replied, holding out her hand to him. "And your son was restless. I thought a walk might settle him." "My son, is it?" Alexander said, placing his hand gently over hers on her rounded belly. "Last week you were certain it was a daughter." Clara laughed. "I reserve a woman's right to change her mind. But boy or girl, this child will be loved." "Beyond measure," Alexander agreed, his voice softening. He drew her close, careful of her condition. "As is his or her mother." Clara rested her head against his chest, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she had agreed to marry this complex, reserved man. "I received a letter from Papa today," she said. "He plans to visit next month." "Excellent news," Alexander replied. "I look forward to thanking him in person for his part in saving Westmoreland. He says he's eager to see the changes we've made to the estate." Clara looked around at the gardens, the freshly repaired outbuildings, the sense of renewal that pervaded the place. "We have accomplished much in a year." "Indeed we have," Alexander murmured, his arm tightening around her. "Though the greatest change has been in me, I think." Clara looked up at him questioningly. "When you came into my life, I was a bitter man," he explained. "Focused only on duty and obligation, convinced that happiness was a luxury I could not afford. You taught me otherwise." "We taught each other," Clara corrected gently. "I was a simple country girl who never imagined she could find her place in your world." Alexander smiled, touching her cheek with infinite tenderness. "You didn't find your place in my world, Clara. You created an entirely new one for us both." As they walked back toward the house, arm in arm in the spring sunshine, Clara reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought her here. She had come to Westmoreland Hall as a bride of convenience, expecting nothing more than security and respect. Instead, she had found love, purpose, and a future brighter than any she could have dreamed. The Earl of Westmoreland might never have expected to fall deeply in love with his country bride, but fall he had. And in that unexpected love, both had found their true home.